Hi guys, it's Enrique again, here to continue some tips on drawing dragons. So today's focus is going to be on drawing the dragon's body and anatomy. Drawing from real life creatures to develop your imaginary one is just going to give your drawing that authenticity which separates the advanced from the novice. I'm going to teach you how to make realistic dragons out of muscles and bone. So let's get started. So when we go about drawing our dragon bodies, we're essentially going to draw them from the inside out, starting with something that's sort of like a simplified skeletal structure. This is called a wireframe. The point of drawing this is to establish the pivot points on the body, to establish the length of the limbs, unless you want your dragon to have macular degeneration later, and to establish a foundation for the placement of the limbs and position of the body. The rest of our drawing is essentially going to be supported by this simplistic wireframe, the same way a creature's bone structure supports its own flesh. For this pose, an S-curve connects the head to the rib cage, which then connects to the pelvis. Continue this spine through to the tail. The torso and legs are supported by the rib cage and pelvis. This torso can fit into a rectangle, where the rib cage fits into 2/3 of the length sideways, and about half the height upward. Since it's curvy, I'm representing the rib cage with an oval shape, while the pelvis is generally represented by a box. This line represents the scapula, the bone on the back of your shoulder. It's going to angle forward, and then we're going to continue the line down to the elbow, angle it down to the forearm, and finally down to the wrist and the paw. Start another line from the pelvis. The upper leg protrudes forward, then angles back to the shin, down the heel, and finally the rest of the foot. With our wireframe in place, we're going to cover these suggestions of bones with indications of muscle groups, which are going to be large mass shapes. So I'm going to go through and make approximations about the thickness of each body part of the dragon. These large groups are simplifications of bone and muscle groups. These are going to show us the space the body takes up, allowing us to think in 3 dimensions. For now, just remember the large muscle groups. You're not going to take the MCAT exam on this, so don't worry about remembering all the names. In the arm-shoulder area, we have the deltoid, which is shaped like a heart. This goes down to the bicep. The bicep is small on the arm because 4-legged animals hardly ever have to do a bicep curl motion. On the back side of the arm is the tricep, which sort of looks like baguette bread or a horseshoe. For this part, where the wings attach to the shoulder blade, I want you to think of the wings as creepy, long, dried up zombie arms. All of the anatomy here is comparable to the human arm, even down to the fingers. I know our source here is a little weird because there aren't really any animals with both wings and 4 separate limbs, at least none with an interior skeleton. Down in the torso area, we have the lats, which are essentially triangular and any angle. Then we have the serratus muscles, which look like fingers wrapping around the rib cage. We can break up the hind leg into 3 large groups. The quads, which are essentially 4 muscles wrapping like flower petals. Then there's the gluteus muscles, which blend together like some sort of foam finger. Finally, there's the biceps femoris, which is appropriately nicknamed the bicep of the leg, which tapers up like the head of a paintbrush. The tail is mostly just a conical tube, which tapers to a point. Mostly, pay attention to the spine as a dividing point of this mass. Yet another thing that tapers is the limbs. They are thickest at the parts which connect them to the body. The feet are like hockey pucks in the way they angle from the limbs. Also, when you're detailing the wings, pay special attention to the curvature. Look at bat wings as a reference which closely resemble the way dragon wings are typically drawn. I know this might seem overwhelming right now, but think about it like driving a car. You no longer consciously think about turning the key, starting the ignition, or putting the brake on. Your subconscious memory sort of does all the work for you. Drawing in stages isn't very different. Now it's time to detail the outermost layer. On this kind of dragon, it's going to be scales. Grading out the scales is going to make the task less daunting, and it's going to prevent you from getting lost in all the overlapping W shapes. When it comes to scales, there are 2 general types. There's a bumpy kind and a plate kind. The plate kind can come in basically any polygon or elliptical shape, and they slide underneath each other to create what looks like knight's armor. Remember, what I've given you here today is just a reference guide to features I saw most common in dragons. You're building a library of reference information in your mind, something to pull from when you invent or draw your own dragons. Start by practicing this method in your sketchbook. Start with a slow, methodical, step-by-step approach. Once you've mastered this, test yourself by seeing how fast you can do it. Be thorough in training yourself in the basic techniques. Once you have this method down repeatedly and consistently, don't be afraid to improvise your own creations and modifications. I hope some of this information has helped you out. If it has, please share this video on your favorite social networking site and sign up for our newsletter to get insights and updates. And above all, stay creative.